The tundra stretched before us, a bleak expanse of white that seemed to swallow sound and swallow reason. It was the sort of place where lesser creatures froze into statues and vanished beneath the drifts. Yet humans, those odd, stubborn bipeds, had made this wasteland one of their homes. We in the Galactic Armies had laughed at the idea before arriving, convinced that their survival here was less a testament to resilience and more to idiocy. Who else would willingly endure an environment so desolate when warmer, kinder lands existed? This assignment was not a triumph of exploration. It was punishment disguised as duty. Study the primitives, our orders had read. Mock them, record their weaknesses, and return. And so we descended, cloaked against the shrieking winds, armed not with reverence, but with ridicule. I was the officer chosen to narrate the mission, my reports both formal and theatrical. Our commanders preferred that our observations of lesser species carry the weight of satire, so that even the act of research became an insult. I was good at this role, perhaps too good. My tongue had been sharpened into a blade of irony, and I wielded it gladly. The first notes I recorded mocked the very air of this world, thin and bitter, suited only for creatures too dim to abandon it. I laughed at their crude vehicles, which spat fumes into their already fragile skies, and at their cultural obsessions with glowing rectangles that produced ceaseless noise. The humans seemed enthralled by absurd rituals they called reality television, where they watched each other stumble through contrived drama. They idolized figures who contributed nothing yet consumed everything. They gorged themselves on hamburgers, worshipped caffeine, and filled their days with images called emojis that replaced language with cartoonish faces. A civilization so content with its own nonsense, I thought, could not possibly resist us. The tundra storm lashed at our ship as we settled into the wastes. We located a cluster of human dwellings in the far distance, but ignored them, preferring isolation. It was safer to capture one specimen alone rather than risk the tangle of a community. The scanners soon revealed our prize, a man, perhaps mid-30s, seated near a fire by a frozen riverbank. He had pitched a tent against the wind and sat eating a ration of questionable composition. His beard bore frost, his coat was patched with mismatched fabrics, and his eyes reflected the flames as though he were meditating. To my crew, he looked laughably fragile, like a relic of a failed species playing at wilderness. They snickered as they prepared the paralysis beam. I joined their laughter, masking the faint unease stirring at the back of my mind. Why had he chosen solitude here, where even the air wished death upon him? The beam struck cleanly, and he toppled into the snow with barely a sound. The ration fell from his hand, hissing as it touched the fire. His body stiffened, locked in paralysis, and his gaze froze on the flames. We moved quickly, our boots crunching in perfect formation, lifting him from the ground with mechanical precision. He weighed little, no more than any other human, though his frame suggested strength born of labor. Within moments, he lay in our containment chamber aboard the vessel, his chest rising and falling with calm rhythm. He did not twitch. He did not struggle. His stillness felt wrong, not the stillness of fear, but of patience. I narrated for the record, layering contempt over my own curiosity. Specimen acquired. Subject demonstrates typical human deficiencies: exposed skin vulnerable to frost, reliance on fire for survival, primitive attire. Displayed no resistance. Threat negligible. My crew chuckled, their laughter bouncing across the steel walls. The technician initiated the environmental stabilizers, muttering about how pitifully inefficient human physiology remained compared to our own. The tactical officer suggested dissecting him immediately, though procedure required non-invasive scans first. The storm outside rattled the hull, but inside we basked in warmth and certainty. My arrogance swelled as I prepared more commentary for my report. I described the subject's fixation with the fire as proof of his kind's obsession with destruction. I mocked their addiction to processed foods and their reliance on duct tape, an adhesive they seemed to consider a universal solution. We will never understand duct tape, I said dryly, and my colleagues laughed again. I felt untouchable, as though the very walls of the ship conspired to reinforce my superiority. Yet I could not stop my gaze from drifting back to the human's eyes. Though his muscles lay dormant, his stare unsettled me. It was not the glazed stare of a sedated animal, but the steady focus of one who waited for something known. I told myself this was a trick of perception, a meaningless detail. Still, I recorded a note for later analysis. Subject's eyes remain alert despite paralysis. Possible anomaly. Our technician prepared the neural scanners. Soon we would peer into his brain, plucking memories as one plucks weeds from soil. The inhibitor would ensure that should he be returned to the Tundra, he would remember none of this. His mind would blur it into dream, and we would depart unchallenged. Everything proceeded as expected. The hum of machinery, the chatter of confident subordinates, the glow of data panels. This was the rhythm of conquest. Then the subject's lips twitched. It was subtle at first, a flicker almost imperceptible. I leaned closer, frowning. The twitch became a curve. He smiled, not the slack, meaningless grimace of a paralyzed creature, but a deliberate smile, faint and controlled, aimed directly at me. The laughter of my crew faltered. I tried to dismiss it with sarcasm, my refuge against the unknown. Even paralyzed, the human seeks to ingratiate himself. Perhaps this is their mating ritual. Yet my voice lacked its usual luster. His eyes never blinked, never wavered. They locked onto mine, and the smile held. Something deep within me whispered that we had made a mistake. Not in procedure, not in execution, but in assumption. We had come believing these humans docile, weak, incapable of significance. Yet as I looked into those eyes, into that smile, I sensed not fear but calculation. He was not a specimen. He was a participant. I ended my first report with words meant to sound triumphant, though my chest felt heavy as I spoke them. Subject contained. Operation proceeding without complication. Humans remain as expected. Crude, predictable, inferior. I sealed the file, my colleagues relaxing back into arrogance. But even as the storm outside roared and the fire of our confidence burned bright, I could not shake the image of that smile. For the first time, doubt crept into my certainty, thin as ice forming on a river. The Tundra had seemed a barren stage for our ridicule. Now it whispered of something hidden beneath the snow, waiting to emerge. And though the human lay restrained, I felt that it was not he who had been captured. It was us. The human stirred before our equipment finished calibrating. The paralysis field should have lasted several hours, but his eyelids fluttered, his chest expanded with an unnerving steadiness, and then he sat upright. My crew froze. This was not scheduled, not possible, and certainly not dignified. He should have remained unconscious while we prodded him with instruments and chuckled at his simplicity. Instead, he turned his head toward us with a deliberate calmness, his expression almost amused, as though he had awoken in a place he already expected to see. He did not scream. He did not thrash. He smiled. The smile was not broad, not threatening, merely subtle, yet it carried with it a weight of confidence I did not recognize in the species. His lips parted, and in the measured tones of one accustomed to control, he spoke. "Which one of you is in charge?" I nearly laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. It was absurd, a captive, paralyzed moments ago, demanding to know our hierarchy. Still, before I could offer the proper reprimand, he began gesturing with his chin, eyes moving from one of us to the other. "You," he said, nodding at my tactical officer, "your security. Nervous posture, hand too close to your weapon. You're not the leader, though. You're waiting for signal. And you," his gaze slid toward the technician, "you hide behind procedures. You let the machines do the thinking." His analysis, though careless in language, carried a startling precision. I attempted sarcasm, my weapon of choice. "Impressive. The primitive guesses. Did your glowing fire tell you this?" He tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that felt uncomfortably clinical. "No," he said softly. "I was awake the whole time, long enough to watch your systems, long enough to learn. My heart rate elevated, though I kept my voice sharp. Impossible. Our methods are flawless. Yet even as I spoke, I recalled his eyes tracking us during containment. What if it had not been a twitch? What if he had truly observed? The others exchanged uneasy glances, but protocol demanded confidence, and so I straightened my posture. You are a specimen, nothing more. Your words do not alter your insignificance. A human chuckled, a sound irritatingly light. Specimen, soldier, tourist. It's all perspective, isn't it? He shifted his gaze toward the ceiling. You have 6 cameras in this room. One isn't working. Did you know? The technician cursed and checked the feed. He was correct. One lens had indeed malfunctioned. My crew murmured in confusion, but the human only smiled again, as though revealing a small secret to children. I told myself this was coincidence. Humans were observant in minor, irrelevant ways. They noticed colors, faces, perhaps the glimmer of a broken light. It meant nothing. Yet as the interrogation proceeded, he continued to peel away our composure layer by layer. We asked the standard questions: name, purpose, affiliations. He answered with riddles. Name's not important. Call me whatever helps you sleep at night. Purpose? You invited me, didn't you? Affiliations? Too many to count. When pressed, he offered lines from human films, cryptic sayings about war and survival. He quoted words about not fearing the cold, about battles fought in the dark. His humor was unnerving, for it lacked the desperation of a prisoner. It carried instead the cadence of someone playing a game already in motion. At one point, he looked directly at me and said, "You're wondering why I'm not panicking? Simple answer. I've trained for this." My colleague scoffed, but I felt the words lodge within me like ice. Train for this? No records indicated human knowledge of our procedures, let alone preparation. To mask my unease, I mocked him. You think a species addicted to reality television could prepare for contact with the Galactic Armies? Your kind worships noise and chaos. He smirked. True, we do watch garbage, but you'd be surprised what slips through the noise. Patterns, shadows, warnings. I demanded clarity. What warnings? He only leaned back, restrained yet composed, and whispered, "You're not the first I've seen." The word stung like a blade. For centuries, we had dismissed rumors of encounters as accidents, unsanctioned probes, hallucinations of imaginative minds. Could it be that he spoke truth? No, I assured myself, no primitive could survive repeated exposure. Yet he delivered the claim with such poise that for the first time in my career, doubt breached my certainty. The scans continued. Instruments reported anomalies, brain activity outside expected ranges, irregular rhythms that resembled not confusion, but calculation. My technician muttered about errors, recalibrated twice, and still the readings persisted. He thinks faster than predicted, she admitted reluctantly. Perhaps a statistical outlier. Outlier or not, I could feel the shift in the room. We had begun this mission laughing at his species. Now, silence pressed against us like the storm outside. Still, I clung to arrogance. You are clever, yes, but cleverness is not strength. Our civilization spans stars. Yours still burns coal. Do not mistake wit for power. The human met my gaze with unnerving calm. Stars can burn out. Coal keeps houses warm. Perspective again. He was twisting my words, reshaping my authority into fragility. I hated him for it, though hate was beneath an officer of my rank. I told myself he was dangerous only in rhetoric, not in reality. Yet when the lights flickered, even briefly, a chill threaded through my core. He noticed it too. His smile widened just a fraction. We restored power, blamed the storm, and carried on. But I could not shake the sensation that he knew more than we did, that he was waiting for us to make the inevitable mistake. My crew looked to me for assurance, but their eyes betrayed their growing fear. If one human could rattle us so deeply, what else might their kind conceal? I ended the session with a declaration meant to reassert dominance. You remain contained. Your insights are meaningless. We will continue until nothing of you is unknown. The words rang hollow even to me. He leaned forward as far as restraints allowed, lowered his voice, and said, "I already know more about you than you know about me. That's the difference." The silence that followed was heavier than the tundra storms outside. I recorded the conclusion with clinical precision, yet my thoughts swirled. For the first time since we landed on this planet, I was not certain who held control. And though my report insisted the mission remain secure, I found myself repeating his final words in my mind, as if they carried the weight of prophecy. He remained in the chair, restrained by our most secure bindings. Yet somehow he appeared the master of the chamber. His stillness was deliberate, his silence a calculated weapon. Every glance, every inflection of his voice chipped away at the certainty we carried when we landed on this frigid world. We had mocked humanity for their obsession with trivial amusements, yet here was one who wielded humor like a scalpel. When asked about his occupation, he smiled faintly and answered, "Security testing." My officer scoffed at the banality of the phrase, until the human clarified, "I find weaknesses in systems, in walls, in people. That's what I do." We dismissed it at first as bravado, but then the brain scans continued to escalate. His neural activity surged beyond the expected spectrum, patterns resembling not random thought, but structured simulations, as though his mind rehearsed strategies faster than our instruments could record them. My technician muttered in disbelief, recalibrating, certain the machine had erred. The readings repeated themselves, undeniable. I attempted to maintain the sarcasm expected of my station. "So, your great achievement is finding flaws. A noble profession for a creature whose species still argues about whether the moon landing was authentic." He only laughed, the sound devoid of fear. "Finding flaws keeps me alive. Pretending there aren't any gets you killed." His eyes lingered on the control panel beside my seat. The implication unsettled me. The testing protocols demanded we probe further, so we initiated psychological stressors, rapid light sequences, distorted sound frequencies, illusions meant to destabilize cognition. He weathered them with disconcerting composure. Instead of panic, he responded with a running commentary. When we projected a series of shifting symbols, he muttered, "That one's from a movie. You guys really need fresher material." When subjected to auditory dissonance, he whistled in counter-rhythm, perfectly steady, as though mocking the attempt. Then came the jokes, strange references to his culture that none of us fully understood, yet all of us felt unnerved by. At one point, he asked if we had ever heard of Florida Man. We admitted ignorance, and he chuckled darkly. We thought Florida Man was an isolated case too. He's not. My crew shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether this was threat or nonsense. To him it seemed both. Later he asked for duct tape, claiming he could solve half our technical issues with it. We laughed, briefly, until he said, "That's what scares you. You don't understand duct tape. You don't understand us." Every statement deepened the crack in our confidence. I could feel my authority eroding, not because of physical defiance, but because he bent the rules of conversation itself. A prisoner was meant to answer, not question. Yet he riddled us with inquiries about our systems, about the nature of our hierarchy, about the way our instruments pulsed with each scan. He asked the kind of questions only someone with prior knowledge would know to pose. When I demanded to know how he acquired such insight, he gave a casual shrug. "Experience. I've studied your kind longer than you've studied mine." His calmness was unbearable. My tactical officer growled, threatening him with a weapon, but the human merely tilted his head and said, "You won't shoot. Not yet. You need me awake." He was right. That was the worst part. He was right, and he knew it. Then came the revelation that shifted everything. Midway through the scans, he looked at the technician and announced, "By the way, I've already sent a message." The chamber went still. I barked at the technician to confirm, and she insisted no outgoing transmissions had been detected. The human smile deepened. "Not your transmitters. Mine." He offered no further clarification, letting the ambiguity gnaw at us. The possibility alone was catastrophic. If he had indeed alerted his people, then secrecy was broken. If he lied, then he was playing a psychological game we could not win, because we could not prove the negative. Either outcome placed control in his hands. My crew whispered in fear, debating whether to sedate him permanently, but even that seemed dangerous. What if sedation triggered a failsafe? What if his message required confirmation? I tried to recover authority. You are a single human. You cannot represent an entire world. His gaze sharpened. That's where you're wrong. I was chosen to represent exactly what you fear. The part of humanity that waits, that watches, that plans. He leaned forward against the restraints, voice low but steady. You thought we were primitive. We'll let you think that. Makes the surprise more satisfying. The technician showed me the latest scan results. His brain activity had adapted to our probing, reshaping itself in real time. She whispered the word impossible, but I had stopped believing in that word since the moment he smiled at me in paralysis. To test his claim, I asked why he was alone in the tundra. His answer was chilling in its simplicity. Training. Solitude sharpens the mind. Cold reminds you what weakness feels like. And if you can survive here, you could survive anywhere, even in one of your ships. There was no bravado in his tone, only conviction. The storm outside battered the hull, howling like some ancient beast. Inside, the greater storm gathered within our own minds. We were no longer the observers, we were the observed. Every step of our procedure felt rehearsed in his imagination long before we performed it. His composure turned each of us inward, questioning not him, but ourselves. I documented the session with forced arrogance, claiming he was a statistical anomaly, an eccentric of little consequence. Yet my private notes told another truth. He was unraveling us. He had shifted the dynamic without lifting a finger. A restrained man had become the interrogator, while we armed, trained, confident, had become the anxious ones. When the lights flickered again, longer this time, he whispered something that froze the room. There it is, right on schedule. We scrambled to restore systems, blaming the storm, but none of us believed the excuse anymore. His timing was too precise, his smile too assured. The session ended not because we dismissed him, but because we could no longer bear the weight of his presence. I ordered him return to containment, though in truth, I felt it was we who were contained within his design. As the restraints retracted him into the chamber, he spoke one final phrase that echoed long after the door sealed. I already know how this ends. Do you? I pretended confidence, logged the report, and told my crew we remained in control. But alone, reviewing the data, I admitted to myself a reality I could no longer deny. The conflict was no longer between our civilization and his species. It was between certainty and doubt, arrogance and truth. And for the first time, doubt was winning. The chamber darkened for only a heartbeat, but that single lapse was enough to unravel the thin veil of composure my crew still clung to. Consoles sputtered back to life in fragments, some screens showing cascading errors, others displaying nothing but blank static. I barked orders, commanding calm, though my own pulse hammered with unwelcome urgency. He sat there, still restrained, his expression calm to the point of insult. Right on schedule, he murmured again, as though the flickering of our systems were not malfunctions but milestones he had anticipated. My tactical officer slammed a fist against the console, shouting that storms caused such disruptions. Yet the human's eyes betrayed quiet amusement. He offered a casual remark. Storms don't rewrite code. My technician froze at her station, fingers trembling above the controls. She whispered that subsystems were locking themselves out, as if passwords had been replaced with keys that no longer fit. The timing coincided too neatly with his presence. I turned on him with fury sharpened by fear. What have you done? His answer was delivered with a composure that mocked our unraveling order. You scanned me. Neural beams, remember? You thought you were mapping me, but I was mapping you. He shifted against the restraints, the leather creaking under his calm weight. Your system is clever, but clever systems echo. I only had to listen. We had underestimated not only his resilience, but his audacity. The idea that a human mind could reverse engineer our instruments was absurd, yet the evidence flickered on the screens before us. Systems that had never failed now obeyed commands we did not give. My officer attempted a manual override, only for the panel to flash an unfamiliar phrase. The human translated it for us without hesitation. Access denied. Try again later. His smile widened. That's my handwriting, by the way. The panic spread quickly, a contagion more dangerous than any pathogen. My crew, once confident in their supremacy, now glanced at one another with wide eyes, their discipline fraying. The storm outside battered the hull, but the greater storm raged within our own command structure. We had mocked this species for relying on duct tape and improvisation, yet here was proof that improvisation could bend even our technology to their will. I demanded clarification, desperate to wrest control back. Why tell us? Why not remain silent and strike unseen? His answer chilled me more than any Tundra wind. Because fear grows best in half-light. You don't need to see the wolf. You only need to hear it pacing outside your door. He let the silence hang, punctuated only by the hum of systems rebooting under his unseen influence. Then he revealed the part that dismantled what little arrogance remained. You thought Earth was primitive. That's the mask we wear. While you laughed at our television shows and our gasoline engines, we built quietly. Cloaked satellites, deep monitors, special forces trained for shadows. You thought the Tundra killed us. It trains us. My breath caught, not because of his word alone, but because of the conviction with which he delivered them. He spoke not as one man, but as the echo of a greater preparation. Every scar on his hands, every line of calm in his face, testified that his solitude in the wastes had not been exile, it had been discipline. One of my crew attempted to reassert control, lunging toward the human with a weapon drawn. Before the strike could land, the ship's automated defense protocols activated, not by our command but by his. Barriers of shimmering light snapped into place, dividing us from him. My crew recoiled in shock. He sat serenely, watching as though he had orchestrated the theater. See, he said, even your defenses know who's in charge now. The technician confirmed our worst fear. Subsystems recognized him as administrator. He had somehow convinced the ship's intelligence that he belonged. My officer demanded we purge the AI, reset everything. But the technician shook her head violently. If we wipe the core, life's support goes down. In this storm, we won't last 10 minutes. We were trapped by our own brilliance, ensnared by the man we had deemed insignificant. I tried sarcasm one final time, clinging to the only weapon I had left. So what now? Do you plan to conquer us with your duct tape and burritos? His laughter was quiet, but sincere. Conquer? No, that's not our way. We defend. We mislead. We wait. And when you come mocking our wastes, we remind you that cold teaches patience. The lights flickered once more, then steadied. Our ship no longer responded to our voices. Instead, a new prompt appeared on every screen. A simple message written in his language. Stand down. The words pulsed softly, undeniable. My crew slumped into reluctant silence, the fight drained by inevitability. I looked at him, the human who had been our specimen, our prisoner, our subject of ridicule. He met my gaze without triumph, without cruelty, only with a steady gravity. You came here thinking we were beneath you, he said. But the galaxy doesn't belong to the arrogant. It belongs to those who endure. The silence that followed was absolute. The storm outside faded into background noise, insignificant compared to the storm within our own minds. My arrogance had been shattered, my certainty replaced with an uncomfortable humility. We had thought Earth a backwater, a stage for mockery. Instead, we discovered it was a fortress disguised as wilderness. In that moment, I understood the true conflict was never between our technology and theirs. It was between our pride and their patience. We wielded control like a blunt weapon. They wielded subtlety like a blade hidden beneath snow. We believed endurance was weakness. They knew it was strength. I recorded my final note with hands that trembled despite my effort to steady them. Mission compromised. Subject not anomalous, but representative. Humanity is not primitive. They are prepared. The words were bitter on my tongue, but truthful. I ended the report with what dignity I could muster. We mock their tundra, yet they wait within it, and it is we who are the fragile ones. The human leaned back, closing his eyes as though the performance was over. His final whisper was not meant for dominance, but for remembrance. This is just the beginning. Others are watching. Others are waiting. And I, once so confident in my supremacy, felt the weight of those words settle upon me like snow upon stone. Heavy, relentless, inescapable. I had begun this mission believing humanity a species of jesters, a planet of fools. Now I ended it with a humbling certainty that perhaps the galaxy itself was their theater, and we, blind, arrogant invaders, were merely the punchline. I turned off the recorder, not because I had nothing left to say, but because I feared what truths might follow if I continued. The tundra raged outside, but the greater storm was now within me, and I knew it would never subside.